The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. Jesus continued his journey and went to the region of Judea beyond the Jordan. And crowds again gathered round him, and, as was his custom, he again taught them. Some Pharisees came, and to test him they asked, "Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife?" Jesus answered, "What did Moses command you?" They said, "Moses allowed a man to write a certificate of dismissal and to divorce her." But Jesus said to them, "Because of the hardness of your hearts, he wrote this commandment for you. But from the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. In his own image, he created them. For this reason, a man must leave his father's house and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let nobody separate." Then in the house the disciples again asked Jesus about this matter, and he said to them, "Whoever divorces his wife and marries another commits adultery against her. And if she divorces her husband and marries another, she commits adultery." A gospel inspired by God. This is the quintessential Jesus stuff this morning. He does two things which are very, very typical of him. The first one, because he has Irish blood in him. He has Irish blood in him. Absolutely.
I didn't know that.
Oh, he was Irish on his dad's side. He was Irish on his dad's side.
On his dad's side?
Yeah.
Oh, come on.
The Holy Spirit is Irish. You didn't know the Holy Spirit was Irish, Margie? You didn't know the Holy Spirit was Irish?
No.
Okay, nice, good. Listen on. Good. Good for you, Pat. Good for you, Pat. So he answers a question. He answers a question by asking a question. He got that from being Irish. So they ask him, "Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife? Yes or no?" And he says, "What did Moses teach you?" And so he answers the question with another. But then, much more importantly, he has this extraordinary penchant for taking a question and recontextualizing it and then answering the original question. So he's not just answering the original question. It reminds me of the kind of the situation you find yourself in sometimes when there's a discussion about, arms or gun carrying. And somebody says to you, if you were in the schoolyard and there was a shooter out there with a kind of an AK-47 and he's going to kill a whole bunch of kids, would you kill him or wouldn't you kill him? That's a kind of a dumb question. You have to ask, what's the guy doing with the gun? How come guns are available? So just saying yes or no isn't answering the question. You have to widen out the context and talk about the much bigger issue. And Jesus is doing the very same thing. You can't talk about divorce until you understand what marriage is. And so he's not going to just give an answer to the question, yes or no, you can or you can't divorce your wife. He's going to talk about what is the meaning of marriage. And so let me give you the context to it. At the time of Jesus, in the Jewish world, it was permissible for a man to divorce his wife, but a woman didn't have the same privilege. A woman could not divorce her husband. So the last phrase today is because Mark is writing for a Roman audience, Roman Christians. And in the Roman world, a man could divorce his wife, or a woman could initiate a divorce as well. But in the Jewish world, women did not have that privilege. So it was a very, very lopsided arrangement, where men could initiate a divorce, but the women could not. So that's the first aspect to it. The second thing is that there was a huge controversy raging around the time of Jesus on this question. Two contemporary rabbis, maybe about 50 years older than Jesus, were going at it, very, very strongly. A guy called Shammei and a guy called Hillel. Shammai was very conservative in his viewpoints, and his teaching was that a man could only divorce his wife if he could prove adultery against her. That was the only pretext on which divorce could be initiated. Hillel was the arch-liberal, and Hillel literally taught that a man could divorce his wife for burning the breakfast. Literally. I'm not exaggerating. And all he had to do was, in the presence of two witnesses, say 3 times, "I divorce you," I divorce you, I divorce you. And she was out without any recourse whatsoever. So this is the background to the question that they're asking Jesus this morning. Is it permissible for a man to divorce his wife for any reason? So are you on Shammai's side or are you on Hillel's side? And the response is, what did Moses command you? And Moses allowed it. He said, yes, but only because of the hardness of your hearts. But that is not how it was since the beginning. And then he gives his own theory of marriage, and then he talks about divorce. So I want to give a chronology of the story of marriage. Marriage as a contract was invented fairly recently, in 3800 BC, by the first great civilization, the Sumerians. They were the first people ever to make marriage a formal contract between a man and a woman. There was no formal contract before that. So it's less than 6,000 years old as a formal contract. Different cultures then have treated very, very differently. And different cultures have had very interesting kinds of insights about marriage and how to prepare for marriage and how to protect a marriage. So in Africa, the great insight in Africa was, you've heard the proverb, Kulem toto huakazi kijiji kizima. The work of raising a baby is the work of the entire village. When I was doing marriages in Kenya, I would pun on this and I would say, Kulea rusi huakazi yavijiji viwili. The work of raising a marriage is the work of two villages. Because that was the great African insight in marriage. Marriage happened, it wasn't just a contract between one man and one woman, it was two tribes of people coming together, it was two villages coming together, and the villages supported the marriage. And so the great African insight of marriage is that it is not just a contract or an arrangement between one man and one woman, there are two entire families involved there. And very often the families can be an obstruction or they can be an assistant to the marriage. If you've got trouble with the in-laws, it's working against the marriage. And so the realization in Africa is everybody has to get behind this contract and support this contract. If there are in-laws fighting with each other, then you're putting tremendous pressure on the couple itself. So that was the great African insight. The ancient Hebrew mystical insight was that in the beginning God created us male and female in his own image. Now, I used to think years and years and years ago that God created women in his image and he created men in his image. What I got to see subsequently was that the image of God is both male and female. And so the full image of God is not present in any person unless you have developed both male and female characteristics. And in a sense, it's a pity that we even use those terms for it. Because strictly speaking, the characteristics do not belong to women or to men. So I much prefer the notion of yin qualities and yang qualities. Now, typically, yin qualities tend to get associated with women because of how they're socialized. And yang qualities tend to get associated with men because of how men are socialized. But these qualities per se are neither male nor female. And so yin qualities are qualities like compassion, love, gentleness, forbearance, patience, these kinds of things. Yang qualities tend to be more intelligence, courage, decisiveness, and they don't belong to men or women. But individual people will tend to have a preponderance of one over the other. Or different circumstances will call for more yang kind of responses, others will call for more yin kinds of responses. And so what Christ is saying is that in the beginning, God created us in her own image. And the image of God has all of these attributes, the yin qualities and the yang qualities. And therefore, the full image of God is only present when there's a balance achieved between these two kinds of categories. So that's the great mystical Jewish insight. Now, Jesus is going to take this and he's going to run with it then. And he says, because that's the truth. Because of this, a man shall leave his father's house. He now gives his theory of marriage. And he suggests that marriage happens in 3 discrete stages that can take years and years and years to accomplish. A marriage is not just a little ceremony that's performed in front of a priest and 2 witnesses that's going to take 20 minutes to exchange vows. That is not a marriage. That's a little ritual. It's not a marriage. A marriage takes years. And it has 3 stages, Jesus says. The first one is you leave your father's house. And he's not talking about relocating from Palo Alto to Menlo Park. He's talking about reprioritizing the relationships in your life. So heretofore, your primary affection and kind of loyalty was to your family of origin. Now you have to leave that, and now your primary, relationship has to be with your spouse. So that the first shift is a shift of priority of relationships. You have to leave your father's house. The second stage, you cleave to your spouse. It doesn't mean that you just give each other a big bear hug. It means you have to start sharing. You share your fears, your hopes, your dreams, your finances, your future. Everything gets shared in common. And that takes a long, long time to accomplish. And then the third stage, Christ then says, now the two have become one flesh. But the word he's using in Hebrew is not this stuff here, meat and bones. It is a personhood. There's only one entity. There's God present, in yin and yang energies in this. And Christ says, if that has happened, if that process, has gone through its finality over several years, if it has achieved its finality, it's not a question of the permissibility of divorce, it's a question of the impossibility of divorce. If you've really met your soulmate and you've done the work that has created a real marriage, it is impossible to put a wedge. It will be more difficult to put a knife edge between spirit and soul than it would be between, husband and wife if they're truly married. Problem is, there are very few marriages out there. Very few people have actually walked through and done the hard work of these things. So in psychology, we talk about there being 4 stages to marriage. The first stage is infatuation. I fall in love with somebody, and the sun and the moon and the stars shine out of my beloved. You can't see any wrong in her or him. That's stage 1. Very easy to stay involved at that stage. The second stage is intimacy. Now we begin to kind of be sexual with each other and be affectionate with each other. And again, it's very easy to stay married at that stage. That's stage 2. Stage 3 always comes. And in psychology, it's called disillusionment, which sounds like a pejorative. But disillusionment means the shattering of the illusion, because the first 2 stages are an illusion. I'm not really in love with you. I'm in love with a projected, fantasized, idealized version of whom I want you to be. And for a while you can maintain that persona and you can be whom I want you to be. But at some stage the ego is going to come through, and my ego is going to come through. And now there's a battle. Instead of 2 personas kind of, coquettishly kind of seducing each other, there's now 2 egos battling with each other. It's at that stage that the real hard work has to be done. Now we need to learn how to communicate better. Now we need to learn how to kind of accommodate to another person's needs. So that's when the growth happens in a relationship. But a lot of people are not prepared to do it, or they don't have the resources to do it. And so we go off and we try to recreate stages 1 and 2 with a whole bunch of new partners until we reach stage 3, and then we're out of it again. But if we have the courage and the resources to go through stage 3 and to really grow, stage 4 happens. And that is real love. I totally accept the entire package. There are things about you that annoy me, but I'm in love with your soul. It's 2 souls now dancing. It's no longer 2 personas trying to seduce each other and pretending to be what they're not. It's no longer 2 egos battling with each other. It's 2 souls dancing with each other. And so that's kind of the psychological model. But my favorite one of all is when soulmates have really encountered each other and they've really done the hard work. There's this great poem by Rumi that says, the minute I heard my first love story, I started looking for you, not realizing how blind that was. Lovers don't finally meet somewhere. They're in each other all along, because there has been a preconception contract between 2 souls to be soulmates for an incarnation. And when you've found your soulmate and you've been prepared to do the hard work of rubbing off the rough edges of ego and to uncover the soul within the other, then ultimately you realize that this was a contract made not just because the Sumerians came up with the idea 3,800 years BC, but because eternally these 2 souls contracted to be part of each other's incarnation. These are yin and yang qualities. That's why I said it's a pity that it's associated with male or female. These are qualities that have no gender attached to them. But we associate typically, we socialize men in one way and we socialize women in the other. And we socialize women to be compassionate and loving and patient. Intelligence is not important, the way we socialize them. And we socialize guys to be courageous and intelligent and decisive. So that's how they're socialized. But those qualities do not belong to men or to women. So for me, it's a pity that we force these categories of feminine and masculine qualities that do not belong to either. They're qualities available to anybody, who has the courage to begin to develop them. But we socialize them in particular ways. That's precisely the problem. And I think that's part of kind of the energetic way in which Christ responded to this. Is what God has put together, nobody should put asunder. because he's looking at a situation where there's a totally uneven playing field, where women literally, are now financially on their own, and they didn't have the rights of inheritance, so they're really, really in the trouble. So it's a very uneven playing pitch to begin with, because men can initiate it, but women can't. But even in the Roman world, where either can, it still leads to a breakdown in relationships. So he's doing two things. He's talking about the inequality of this system, that he inherited as a Jew, and at the same time he's talking about the inadequacy of the model of marriage that doesn't realize what marriage really, really is about. So there's two issues that he's addressing here. But the women were in big trouble, financially in huge trouble. Yeah. And we still have the same problem. Women, typically, women and children suffer much more from divorce financially than do men, typically. Absolutely. So society has to kind of inculcate these values. Now there's a little bit of a biochemical basis for it, so it's not taken out of nothing, because men tend to have much more testosterone in their system, which is much more about aggression and decisiveness and stuff. Women tend to have much more oxytocin, which is about relatedness, and so there is a biochemical basis, but it's been exaggerated wildly by the socialization process. Little boys are told again and again and again, little boys don't cry, big boys don't cry, or whatever. How can you expect guys to go into battle and kill other people, if they're soft and compassionate? So they're to be socialized to be warriors, whereas women are being socialized to be baby minders. And so society already, on the basis of biochemical kind of differences, is really exaggerating these differences and making it impossible then for men to show compassion or for women to be decisive. Psychologists decided to test, how prejudices affect, or how belief systems affect prejudices. So he set up a study in which he taught the kids that it's been demonstrated that blue-eyed people are much more intelligent than brown-eyed people. And then he watched what happened in the classroom, and they started discriminating against brown-eyed people. The next year he switched it, and he told the students brown-eyed people are much more intelligent than blue-eyed people. And then watch what happened in the schoolroom. So it's not a real study. That study is not a real study. It's a pretend study to determine how belief systems influence prejudices. There's no difference in IQ based on eye color. But it was done as a teaching technique to show just precisely if people believe something, how very, very quickly it creates prejudices. My favorite one of that is, this is a real story about a young school teacher, young girl, 23, 24, just out of teacher training college, and she goes to this grade school. And they assign her the toughest group of kids in the school that nobody else can handle. Failing in all grades and all kinds of, behavioral problems and whatsoever. And they give her, without telling her this, they give her this classroom. And at the end of the year, the kids are performing magnificently. And the principal brings her and he says, I can't believe what you have achieved with these kids. You've got this extraordinary job you've done with them. They're at the top of the school, academically. How the hell did you do it? And she said, what do you mean? You gave me the brightest kids in the school. He said, what do you mean you gave me the brightest kids? She said, you said John Smith, 144, Mary Murphy, 148. She said, with IQ levels like that, how could I not succeed? He said, what do you mean IQ levels? That's their locker numbers. Literally. She thought there was their IQ levels, so she started treating them like geniuses. And they perform like geniuses. So it's just their locker assignment numbers. So it's so much, what you believe about people is how people will respond and how they'll act. Because I imagine you're working against years and years and years of inculcation where these kids have been told they're useless and they're screw-ups and they never amount to anything. And so the kid has bought that. And so persuading the child of their own abilities is a huge block. Obviously you've got the teacher's prejudice and you've got the child's own prejudice, and you've got societal prejudice just shoring up both of the prejudices. Totally. And the best part, of course, is that every single person is God in disguise. Exactly. So it's not that you're just looking for something that may or may not be there. You're identifying that which is the very, very core essence of the individual.
Conscious of looking for that. Yeah.